Welcome to HSBC Global Viewpoint, the podcast series that brings together business leaders and industry experts to explore the latest global insights, trends, and opportunities. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes. Thanks for listening, and now on to today's show.
Welcome to HSBC Perspective Series. My name is Jing Liu, HSBC Global Investment Research Chief China Economist, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Professor Xinquan Tu, Dean of the China WTO Studies, University of International Business and Economics. Professor Tu, thanks again for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I just wonder, now we have been several months after the shock of the April 2nd Liberation Day, and the U.S.-China relationship seemed to go through dramatic ups and downs. We have the elevated April tariff, and then now we have another 90-day truce. So what do you see will happen several months from now?
So I think the two sides have realized that the total decoupling is not possible, at least for now. So they still need each other, or they still have to depend on each other. So I think it is very possible for the two sides to reach a deal. But this deal, I think it will be very different from other deals made by the U.S. with other trading partners. One important difference is China also will impose additional tariffs on the U.S. So it's unlike other deals that the U.S. will have unilateral tariffs on others, but others actually will even give more recessions to the U.S. So that's one difference.
It's indeed reciprocal, right?
Yeah, that's indeed reciprocal. Another thing is I'm afraid that the tariffs, the U.S. tariffs on China will still be higher than U.S. tariffs on the others. Because right now the U.S. actually has a kind of a tiered tariff regime. And China, of course, is the most important target for U.S. tariffs. So if tariffs on China are same as others, then the U.S. cannot achieve its goal to kind of move China out of this so-called the U.S. Supply chains. So as I said, although there could be a deal, but tariffs on China will still be higher than the others.
So how does that compare to the current tariff? Because according to our calculation, we have around 20% under Trump 1.0, 10% universal tariff, and another 20% of the fentanyl-related tariff. So right now it's around 50%.
Yes.
And recently, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Benson said that the status quo works quite well, and if something is working, don't break it. So does that mean the 50% might be the terminal tariff U.S. imposes on China?
I think it is still hopeful that the two sides could have a kind of deal on the fentanyl tariffs, because China is trying hard actually to control or to deal with the fentanyl issue. And actually China already has adopted a number of measures to deal with it. And the two sides are still negotiating on this issue. So if the two sides can find a solution about this issue, then the 20% fentanyl tariff could be reduced or eliminated. But in my opinion, or my guess is that even though the tariffs could be reduced or eliminated, but the final tariff, as I said, the final tariff on China will be still higher than 30%. So because, as you said, right now it's 50%. If 20% is reduced, then it would be 30%. I don't think this 30% would be satisfied to the U.S.
That's lower than the Switzerland tariff.
It's as you said, it's even lower than Switzerland, and also like Canada.
India.
Right? India is 25%.
Another 25% kicking.
Yeah, that's
but that
another,
could be negotiated away.
So even though the two sides could make a deal on fentanyl, the U.S. will find other ways to increase
sector tariff here and there.
Yes. And I think actually, in terms of international competition, the U.S., as you said, the U.S. has imposed a lot of sectoral tariffs on many significant sectors. It's even more important than the so-called reciprocal tariff to some extent, because these sectors are very, as I said, very important for the U.S. and also for many other trading partners like auto, like semiconductor, steel. So actually, they are more important than the average reciprocal tariffs.
So we talk about the potential impact on global supply chain. Do you think, after the dust settled, what kind of changes we might observe in the global supply chain? Is that the U.S. Intention to maybe remove China from from its own supply chain for the sectors that U.S. probably deems very important?
I think the purpose of the U.S. tariff war is to move manufacturing back to the U.S. So in comparison to the U.S.-Japan trade war in 1980s, actually at that time the impact was that the supply chains were moved to other Asian countries, especially in Southeast Asia and also other East Asian countries, including China later. But now this time is a little different. The purpose of the U.S. is move supply chains back to the U.S. and the U.S. imposed tariffs on almost all countries. So then this kind of tariff difference between China and others, and also among others, will have very complicated impact. It's not so straightforward. It's unlike, as I said, in the U.S.-Japan trade war. And also it depends on different sectors. Because in different sectors, this tariff gap is also different. So I think that the world will see a kind of very complicated reorganization of the global supply chains. And especially the US is much more protective than in 1980s. So I think one important change is, of course, the supply chains to the U.S. will be changed. Another thing is, I think the global supply chains, to some extent, will move out of the U.S. and be reorganized among other countries. So for now, as I said, the U.S. is kind of isolated from the rest of the world.
So you're saying maybe we will in the future see in U.S. for U.S. type of supply chain, and then some reorganization of supply chains outside of the U.S.
Yes.
That's very interesting because when I talk to our corporate clients, some of them mention they actually feel impractical if, let's say, they move their supply chain somewhere in a third-party country, and several years down the road, there could be change on tariff again. It's just impractical for them to restructure the supply chain every several years. So maybe they will have to bring back the manufacturing to the U.S. So if that's the case, do you think in the U.S.-China potential deal, there could be something on the investment?
Actually, in my opinion, and also I think on the China side, we believe that more investment flows between the two countries will be helpful to deal with trade issues, especially if China can, if Chinese companies can invest more in the U.S. It could reduce China's direct exports to the U.S. and reduce trade imbalance. But for now, it seems that very, very difficult. I think the major issue is on the U.S. or in the U.S. eyes, competition between U.S. and China is strategic, not about industrial competition. It's more than industrial competition. So they have more security or strategic considerations about China's investments. So it's a very, very difficult.
And maybe a bit away from the China-US relationship and talk about the China relationship with other countries, we have seen this trade protectionism probably fair to say, on the rise, because we see the pushback from other trading partners citing concerns on China's excess capacity in some sectors. So how do you see China's relationship with other trading partners?
Actually, this kind of we call it a domino effect of trade protectionism has happened before. The U.S. impose anti-dumping tariffs on Chinese products, and Chinese companies go to other markets, then other markets will also impose tariffs on Chinese products. In some sectors, it already happened actually before. But right now, maybe the scale is larger because the U.S. imposed tariffs on almost all Chinese products. So some countries are afraid of so-called trade diversion effect. To some extent, it will happen, of course, right? Chinese companies cannot export to the U.S., then they will try to export to other markets. So it will happen. And I think the major problem for now is, especially like for the Europe, right now Chinese companies are competing with them in those so-called strategically important sectors. So it's not only a trade issue, it's actually a competition issue.
That's right.
Because the Chinese companies are more competitive, then they will take more seriously. But again, as I said, I think this kind of trade conflict, the better solution is to increase investment, even bilateral or two-way investments. Actually, right now, some European companies, car companies, right, are investing more actually in China.
Yes, we
because
see that too.
China has some advantage in some areas.
Yeah, you reminded me that several years ago, China and the EU almost signed a deal on investment. Is that possible? They can renew the negotiation on that?
Yeah, it is very big pity actually that the two sides, reached a deal but ignore it later, didn't ratify it. It's a very big pity. If that agreement was implemented, it would be much better situation for now. But right now, I think the situation has changed. So some conditions, some terms in the agreement maybe are not good enough. I mean, there are
see.
many changes. So on the China side or on the EU side, maybe they will have new requests or new demands on each other. So for now, I think, in my opinion, the better way is to make a new deal, including both trade and investment. Actually, investment only is not enough, not good enough. At that time, as I said, trade imbalance is not so significant. But now it's more and more important or more serious. So the two sides will have new thoughts. So you need to combine trade and
Some good
investment.
efforts.
Yes.
Trying to make a win-win situation at least. I see that China is adjusting its domestic policy as well. Like there's a much more focus on stimulating the domestic consumption, and also this so-called anti-involution campaign, which to me sounds like something we observed several years ago, supply side reform. I remember in 2015, there was also the concern globally about China's overcapacity in steel and coal industry, and China ended up cutting the capacity very aggressively. Do you see China make a similar effort this time around?
Actually, in China, this kind of overproduction or overcapacity will happen periodically, actually.
So part of the business cycle, but in
Yes,
China,
yeah.
probably even more salient.
It's a business cycle with Chinese characteristics. But this time, I think it's a little different. One thing is, I would say this round of overcapacity or overproduction, at least one reason is due to U.S.-China trade war. Especially since 2018, the U.S. imposed a lot of export controls. So China is very concerned about this kind of problem. So since then, we really adopted so-called dual circulation strategy. I think its focus is on the production side, on the supply side. We try to meet try to deal with so-called shortcomings in the supply side. So we invest a lot, right? Especially in the manufacturing sector. Of course, another issue is the housing market has been declining. So then more investments go to manufacturing.
I see.
So then we got this problem of overproduction right now. Of course, this time maybe it's a little more difficult because, as I said, the real estate sector is not only investment but also consumption. But now this market is declining, so we are lack of this big part of consumption. Then we have to stimulate other domestic consumption. But I think China has kind of long tradition of saving money, not spending money, right? And also there are also some other restrictions, especially in the public sector. We tend to save money again, right? We tend to control consumption, so it would be more difficult. So I think for now, at least we need a kind of transformation of minds.
So in an ideal situation, China tried to rebalance from the production focus to consumption focus, and China can become a much bigger consumer, and that could help deal with the trade imbalance to some extent. And ideally, China, US, China, EU can sign some comprehensive deal covering trade and investment, and then we probably end up with a much better place than we are now.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but in your view, are we at sort of the end of the globalization or re-globalization? And going forward, what's your basically prediction?
Yeah, I think there will be at least a different kind of globalization, right? Of course, the globalization was stimulated by, guided by the US or led by the US. But now the US is trying to isolate itself from the rest of the world. Of course, not fully, right? Like in the digital sector or in the financial sector, the US is still the leader of the world. But in the manufacturing sector, at least, the US is going back to isolationism. But I think among others, they still believe in globalization or believe in trade liberalization. So right now, as I know, the US has decided to refuse pay money to the WTO. So basically, the US is actually exiting from the WTO. But other WTO members still support the WTO. They still support the MFN principle. So, of course, because of their bilateral trade deals with the US, there will be some kind of damage to the MFN principle. But basically, I think they will stick to the MFN treatment. So then among them, there is still globalization. Right? There are still WTO rules. All these trade liberalization commitments and rules will be implemented. So in this sense, I think globalization will persist. But of course, I don't know whether or when the US will come back. But I think we are economists, so we believe in the principle of economics.
Comparative advantage and free trade.
Will work always, right? Maybe not perfectly, but it will finally work.
Yeah, that's a gravity, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor Tu. That's a very fruitful discussion. And thank you everyone for listening and watching our podcast.
Thank you for joining us at HSBC Global Viewpoint. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with new episodes.